Welcome back, everybody. DestinysJesus here. In this video, I'm looking at HEN. This guy's been absolutely dominating on NAE recently, despite the fact he's used. He's playing on a really high ping disadvantage compared to other players, and he's still able to get really high kill games, as you can see here, and have really consistent placements. I was actually on a call with him while he was screen sharing most of these games, so I've got a kind of an idea of how he's playing, but I'm going to break down exactly what he's doing during the early, mid-game during his fighting in some of the games, and also most of the things that we're focusing on is during late games that will help you guys perform better whether you're high ping or not, and also make sure that you're performing better in these solo cash cups that are coming up that are so useful for getting teammates. As always, I hope you guys enjoy. Make sure to go check out the Solos Masterclass and also leave a like if you did. So one thing that HEN did that's quite unique compared to a lot of other players is that he's always trying to find an upgrade during his mid game. So right here you can see he's already got a spaz, so he actually makes the effort of going and actually upgrading to a purple infantry. The good thing whenever you rotate into these spots where the upgrades are is the fact that you can always go ahead and try to find a fight in the area if you're in a W key game. In his later games, he's actually doing a different drop spot. I think he went Pleasant one game and he went Craggy in another. All of those spots have upgrades for himself, so you can actually upgrade at any of those spots and get an infantry as well. Infantry is insanely good for solos, especially if you're confident of fighting without a assault weapon, just because you can get massive beams just like this. So right here, this guy peeks him, simply bloom battles with the infantry, and there's obviously no bloom on it, so he immediately wins that fight. And the amount of times he does this during the mid game, where he just beams somebody for 120 or 160, and then he's got an easy kill from there, is absolutely ridiculous. Good movement on this other guy with a sideways swing, and then from here, this is very simple. Whenever you've got somebody boxed up like this, all you need to make sure that you go ahead and do is not take an over peek where you actually rush it too much. Just take your time and wait for them to peek you, especially when they're 1 HP. It's quite likely the opponents peek you. You don't need to do anything too crazy in terms of going for a shot. Let's take a look at a couple of different things that you need to be doing during solo cash cups. So if you're trying to take fights, or for this example, if you're on high ping like HEN is in this NAE cash cup. First of all, just being on edge zone allows you to get way easier isolated fights, being less likely to get third partied. And secondly, especially if you're playing on high ping, you need to be trying to carry a harpoon in your inventory. It's so good for just taking walls. In a fight like this, where the other person's 200 HP, obviously don't just run up straight on their wall and start pickaxing. So what HEN does here is perfect. Swings far to the left, so he barely gets tagged, he takes the wall, gets the wall and the cone slams the other player, since they were going for the shot at the same time. It wasn't a 50-50, the guy wasn't even holding his wall, so to get the wall, gets that trade, and as soon as he gets that trade with it's somewhat even HP, he realizes that, okay, I have the advantage here because I have a purple pump, I can win this angel if I open one and get 100 tag. At this point, he's got a massive amount of damage on the other players since they swap to the AR to get out of the box. So he goes up a layer. As he goes up a layer here, does this jump as he opens the wall. Whenever you do a wall like this, it's really important that you make sure you don't just stand in the middle of it where the opponent can hit you really easily. So HEN actually is the correct thing here, which is jump way up, gets a shot through the ramp, and then kills his opponent. One thing that HEN is almost famous for is just how good his ARing. Him and Chapix have some of the best ARing, and it's really allows him to excel when it comes to high ping. If you're taking a straight up fight versus somebody that's on a high amount of HP and you both have purple pumps and you're playing on high ping, you're going to be a massive disadvantage in that fight. But if you can open a fight by catching an unexpected angle, as HEN is doing here, from just behind this guy on the ridge, he's catching him refarming on the rotate to the zone, since HEN always likes to play the edge of first, second and third zone, just as you can see here. You're able to get a massive amount of damage on the player. They're forced to box up, and the thing is of this, they don't know that you're high ping in this situation. You could be on 200 ping, you could be on 0 ping, they don't really know. They're going to be panicking, they're going to be trying to make a lot of space, and you can often catch them off guard. Right here, HEN goes up, catches the guy facing the other way. This guy's a little bit clueless. Then he sprays in and gets the wall place. You can see as soon as he sees that pencil movement where the guy's actually going for an edit on his stair, HEN does that, swings to the left a little bit to not take any damage, and then immediately gets this refresh. And the good part about that, and the fact that he's playing edge in most of these zones, is the fact that he gets such a good refresh on a play that was pretty stacked when HEN's in a somewhat shambles situation with no risk of third partying. So this is something that I know you guys definitely struggle, which is winning your first game and making sure you get a good start on the cash cups. You always need to make sure you try to do as good as possible in your easiest games, which is the first game. So HEN shows how to do that perfectly here. He's late rotating into 50-50 zone. He knows all these other players are actually contesting high, and they're all focusing on the other players contesting high, not on him rotating back zone. Might seem a little bit risky doing this kind of high map play, but the chances of getting held and shot by a lot of people are quite slim because there really isn't too many people left. So he has a simple job of just holding on to height here, bloom fights the guy a little bit, and make sure as soon as zone pulls that he's going to be able to reconnect it. He gets a pretty decent zone, but you really have to consider the chance of it pulling into the ocean or really far up here is quite slim. So he has a very simple job of just making sure all he has to do is just reconnect on top of the other player's high ground, make sure he's got multiple connection points, and then from there you can just get a load of kills of ARs and maybe drop for a refresh or two. But if he plays his mites on height properly, like he's doing here, being very cheap and effective, making sure he's not getting shot, he actually has a really easy chance of winning this game just by sitting on height, since most players aren't going to be able to contest since he's got a lot of AR ammo. This is another really good mid-game fight example from Hen here. So you can see she gets his bow tag to initiate the fight. Really important to make sure you at least get some damage on your opponent rather than just pushing them to 200 HP, as I mentioned earlier. And then from here you can see he has the advantage of the bow where the guy has to try to pop his minis and bigs. So Hen can just constantly pressure and force the guy to rebox. And as he reboxes, just make sure he's got edits set up to actually go for shots. As you can see, he keeps pressuring, goes to the wall take since the guy's still popping his mini. That's the important thing whenever you get them low to start the fight, is ultimately trying to be finishing a mini, and you can take the wall while they're not even holding it. There's a really nice trick that I like he does here. He doesn't get the wall the first time. Instead, he goes around and actually baits the fact that he's going to go around from these other angles. The guy actually looks away thinking that Hen's going to drop from these other sides, and instead he drops back into the ramp, places a cone, and almost gets a shot off in that little timing window. Now here, at this point, this is the perfect example of what you should be doing. Stop just pressuring one thing, especially when the chances of you winning are 50-50, or even less than that if you're playing on high ping. Instead, start pressuring multiple different things. So he pressures the wall from above, just like that. Then he starts pressuring the cone. Now he finally drops down onto the wall, gets it since the guy was trying to hold the cone above. And then from here, it's a nice chip tag from above. Jumps down and grabs the wall, places a cone, and then gets to Elim. Really simple stuff of pressuring multiple different things, forcing the guy to rebox and getting chip tags just through having actually really good crosshair placement of where the guy's moving to get a nice Elim off spawn. And then from there you can kind of chill out for the rest of the mid game and just focus on farming up. This is probably one of the best first moving rotates I've ever seen from a player from Hen here on their NAE Cash Cup. So you can see he's in a really good position, he's got minis, bigs, and most importantly, the fact that he's got peppers. Peppers obviously allow you to rotate really quickly, also allows you to leave a lot later and rotate at timings. A lot of times people see you rotating with pepper, won't even bother to shoot you, just because it is so hard to get shots on you. So let's skip to actually where Hen starts doing this rotate here in a second, and actually talk about why he decides to do this path in specific. So this is a really important concept that I cover in the Solos Masterclass, which is the dead side of 50-50. The dead side is basically the spot in 50-50 where it's 50% out, so there's basically nobody there. So depending on where the 50-50 zone pulls, this is the congested side on this right hand side here. You can see how many players are congested up on this east hand side, but the west hand side on the left has basically nobody there. That is the dead side, and it's going to allow Hen a really free rotate here. So pay attention to his builds at this point. 136 builds, pops one pepper, places 3 builds there, keeps moving, places another one on his back, and just swims through the dead side of zone. It's very hard to hit him because of how quickly he's going, and he's able to rotate the whole way forward. Now most importantly, this is a mistake that a lot of players make, is actually to stop on low ground. Hen instead decides to actually go the whole way up, gets on top of this other player's tarp on the end of first moving, gets into a position way on the front side of zone, starts to look for AR kills backside. Obviously kills aren't that important, but at this point an extra kill is really important, and it could actually allow him to get a refresh really easily as well. So he keeps looking for a kill here for a second, realizes he hasn't really got a good opportunity, and then he spots it. With the fact that he's still got pepper pops, he realizes he can have a really easy high ground take, so his builds here are still really good. He's only used about 20 builds so far to get the whole way from the backside to the front side of first moving, and now he's going to start looking up at height. The most important thing when you're doing a high ground take is to make sure you're either doing it at the front side or the backside, so you can have an easy job of making sure that you force the other player off for it. If he was on the whole way of front side zone here, like actually in the end zone, it'd be quite hard to contest because there's another player on the front side. Instead, headings the whole way on backside, forcing the other player off. Now he begins the simple job of just ramping up. Other players aren't really aware of it. Hen keeps ramping up in metal, gets the whole way above, takes the bloom fight again, gets some chip damage in that forces the other player into being a little bit more scared and trying to go for a hill. Then he goes the whole way into Storm extra deep, make sure he connects properly in Storm, and in this position all he needs to do is monitor the back of the top. The mistake that other player made that can be prevented is just making sure you're monitoring the back of your top, making sure nobody's back there, hence even going to the effort of actually hiding himself so he can beam somebody if they were trying to take height. And then from there he's got a really simple game. All he needs to do is just sit on height, zone pulls his way into the mountain. It's almost like he knew where zone was going, and he just has a simple job of making sure he stays with everybody, maintains the high ground, and he did it with such a little amount of builds used. So we've already seen Hen actually rotate first moving with peppers, but in this game he doesn't have peppers, and he actually does it really cheaply in a way that's basically completely efficient. So first of all, it's just him holding players here. He gets zoned towards him, so you can just hold these other players absolutely insane. Even AR beams on these other players to get Elims here. Whenever you do get moving towards you should always be trying to look for a kill. Now at this point, I'm the actual moving zone. You can see he actually commits to low ground. This is really good just because of the fact there's nobody else low ground at this point. He's killed 2 other players that were on low ground behind him, so he knows it's going to be very cheap. And all he has to do is just cover his head and go very cheaply like so. And the good thing with this is the fact that he does have a lot of shield, so you can kind of think of having shield as being able to save on your mats, right? If you've got a load of mats and no shield, you're obviously using a lot more mats. But in this game, he has 2 bigs, 5 minis. He's not going to be needing them later on, and he can just use them on first moving if he's staying front side, not really using too many mats, and just seeing how much he can get away with. So he gets beamed a little bit here. Instead of rushing forward and committing to a full massive tarp, she opens a nice wide open edit and then just figures out, how can I take this path really clean? He's also trying to look for a refresh at this point, which he doesn't actually end up getting. He could have got this really easily if he misses his shot. Instead of committing for that kill on the player with only Cypher mats, most likely since they're rotating all around as well, he instead decides to keep rotating forward and just keep moving. Really good example, just the fact that you don't need to be doing a massive tarp like all these other players are doing. You can just very simply rotate for free on first move. He can just get jumped on here in a second, does a good job of just making sure he stays completely forward, makes a couple extra metal boxes, and then he's able to just defend this guy away and wait for seconds moving to pull. Here's another really good example from HEN of what he's actually doing on this first zone. So he's trying to get in a fight. Obviously he's really stacked on loot, but you can still look for opportunities to go for fights, and especially with his loadout with Uncon Craggy, this game was absolutely insane. He had a purple tack, which is really good as a spot weapon, and the infantry, and a harpoon to get in box. So you can see he actually immobilizes himself behind this rock. It's really important to make sure you put yourself in a spot that's going to catch other players off guard, right? Don't just sneak around hills unless you're behind somebody, because that oftentimes will just get built immediately. Right here, just playing behind a rock allows him to get a massive amount of damage on this other player, cracks him in 2 shots, and then from there just has to jump in and hits 2 easy tack swap shots. The opponent pumped first, and then the amount of delay on the pump allows HEN to still get 2 tack shots in that time, which is absolutely insane. Tack is extremely underrated. If you haven't already watched my Muzz video where he's actually using the tack effectively, I would highly recommend you guys check that out. It is so good for solo W King and just finishing fights quickly, like right there. So after HEN took that initial engagement, we got massive beam and got the kill. He hasn't taken a single fight or even shot at anybody throughout this entire mid game. He's basically just setting himself up perfectly to have a really good mat situation and heal situation to go into moving zones. And that's probably the biggest thing you guys need to take away from this. If you're hyping outside of your first game, or even if you're low ping outside of your first game, you shouldn't be going for multiple different fights. You should instead just be playing a lot more smart, a lot more calculated, trying to make sure you put yourself in a good position as possible to go for that 25-point win, since that will bump you so much further up the leaderboard than any other amount of kills. It is really hard to get a lot of kills at the moment, especially because the player skill has increased so much. You can't really just quickly drop a 20 bomb. You need to make sure that you just put yourself in a position endgame to do well and get the most points there. Right here is some really nice timing that HEN gets on its 50-50 rotate, gets a little bit of a refarm, again late rotating, but not entirely late. There's still other players behind him, and he's basically scouts out and realizes that he can get in a good position here, uses markers as he comes into zone, gets really elevated and gets above these other players, in metal most importantly, reconnects, and then he decides to start playing for height. Most important thing when you play for height immediately after 50-50 zone is you figure out exactly where the other players are, if somebody can ramp you or not. So he's pressuring this other player so they can't ramp him, and then he's going to start looking to actually play height here in a second. Keeps looking, starts scouting, realizes there's one other player on that side of 50-50 zone, and there's nobody else actually near him, so it's a really simple job of just making sure he stays up on top here throughout this moving zone. So as first moving kind of pulls towards HEN here, what he does is really nice. He instead decides to stop himself from rotating early, which a lot of other players make the mistake of doing, and instead sit on the backside, try to go for some kills. So if he was able to get one of these kills on a low HP player with the infantry, he'll be able to harpoon, which is really nice as well. Now he starts looking up for height, realizes the other player is actually holding it properly, and this is the other player that was on that high ground from earlier, so HEN was completely aware of him, and now he just begins his rotate. Most important thing here is the fact he's not really overbuilding or full topping. He's basically just recycling other people's builds, going late, making sure he's covering the necessary angles so he doesn't get beamed too heavily, and then gets himself into a position here where you can actually start looking up for height at the end of first moving again, which is pretty much the correct way that you want to go ahead and do it. We looked at a couple of different height takes earlier. This is another one that can work in solos as well, which is basically getting underneath somebody and chopping them out and then trying to go for a retake on them. Unfortunately, it doesn't work out for HEN here. As you can see, another player can test at front side at the same time. So despite the fact that he gets the kill and gets all the mats, he's not actually able to maintain high ground. But that is still a really nice refresh. And his mats throughout that moving zone were so little and so sparsely used just because of how cheaply he's doing it. He's always following those old builds, making sure other players are doing the work and tarping for him, and then he's simply just following on top, placing some ramps over his head and covering their side angles. Here he goes to another high ground lurk play where he's basically looking from below on the other player. Really can be effective if you look at the correct opportunities. Right, he's not really got a good opportunity to actually do it because the player's playing the whole way up. There's actually the cash cut winner, Iomzo, who's 14. And he gets some damage on him, but he's forced to drop. And then from there, he's just got to play out a slightly shambles game where he goes down in the second here. since he's not able to get a refresh. Still a pretty decent performance by Hen. Only 7 games played, pretty much every single game was endgame, and he had a really good performance in terms of getting 5th place on NA. As always, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Make sure to like. I'm going to be doing a lot more of these solo videos focusing on the people who do well in the cash cups. I did want to cover Hen since I was watching his tournament live and he did really well, but I might do some other videos on players such as Yomzu, who actually won the cash cup. He's a really underrated player at the moment as well, doing really well despite the fact he's only got like 5k on his, like, so he's having a crazy pop-off season. Or if you want to suggest some players down below that I can look at and actually video just like this and kind of break down how they're winning these cash cups, or even how to W key videos on players that are taking a lot of fights, which might be fun to look at as well.